What does the New Testament say about giving? Now, we saw in last week's video that Christians are not expected to tithe, but what we also saw was that there are principles of tithing that do carry through to the New Testament. What are those principles? Stay tuned to find out. We saw last week that there were two key principles at work in tithing. The first was to support community members who have needs. The second was to support the ministry. Now, in this week's video, we're going to look at the first of these principles, supporting community members in need. Specifically, we're going to look at three different ways that the New Testament teaches us to do this. The first way that the New Testament teaches us to support is by providing for the immediate needs of the community. In 1 Timothy 6:17, it says, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life." Now, what's really important to understand about this verse is that for all of the New Testament, we're talking about people who are living at subsistence level poverty. What that means is that you don't know where your next meal is coming from. You will be lucky to have a meal a day, and at any point, that might all go away. So you're basically just living at a basic point of survival on a constant basis. Now, in this kind of context, it is essential that you're part of a community because it is inevitable that at some point you're going to fall into hard times and you're going to need people around you to support you. Now, there are many different communities that you're part of. Well, your primary community will always be your family. That's your primary social group that you need to have in order to survive. But then beyond that, you might have your village or extended family or just social groups that you're part of. But the point is that for everyone, you need to be part of some sort of broader group for the purposes of having someone there to lean on in hard times. And so in this particular context, the Christian community provides that type of community. They provide a group of people who see themselves as family and who see their responsibility as being to help other people when they have these needs. And so that was one of the primary functions of the early Christian community. They became what was known as a network of exchange, where one person can't support an individual themselves, but the whole community rallying together with their own little bit of resource can pull together in order to support members such as widows who have specific needs. This is what the Christians were able to do. The second way that the New Testament teaches us to support the community is, in this case specifically, providing for the widows. In 1 Timothy 5:3, it says, "Give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn first of all to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family, and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. No widow may be put on the list of widows unless she is over 60, has been faithful to her husband, and is well known for her good deeds, such as bringing up children, showing hospitality, washing the feet of the Lord's people, helping those in trouble, and devoting herself to all kinds of good deeds." Now, the thing to understand for an ancient wife, and we've seen this in the last couple of videos in this particular series, is that women were married at a very young age. They were married at an age where they were ready to bear children. So we're talking about 13 to 15 years old. Now, these women have never had an education. There's no point educating somebody who's not going to go into public life. There are no career opportunities for women. Their role in life is to bear children. And in a world without contraception, that's going to be happening all the time. And so her role and responsibility is to bear and raise children. That's just what her role is, her function in society. And in a world where family is the central unit of society, growing and raising families is everybody's responsibility. So for the wife, this is what she's doing. She has no other skill set that she can apply if she was to lose her husband to go and work elsewhere and put the kids into daycare and do a job somewhere else. These are just not options for her. And so for many widows who've lost their husbands, they find themselves destitute. They have no other options available to them. They are alone because for their entirety of their married life, well, from childhood to to when they're married, they're looked after by their father. And then from the time they're married, they've been looked after by their husbands. And so now they're alone. They don't have these options anymore. What are they to do? Well, in some cases, if she's a young widow, she has the opportunity to remarry. And so women are dying in childbirth a lot. What that would mean is that there are always husbands looking for new wives. And so the opportunities to remarry are always going to be there. Now, it sounds horrible to talk a bit this way in the 21st century, but we are living in a very different time. In the first century, if you're looking for a wife, you're looking for somebody who can bear children for you. This is just what you're looking for. It's one of the requirements in the ancient world. And so if she's still young and of childbearing age, she can find another husband, or she might be able to return to her father. Now, people die young in the ancient world. The average life expectancy is about 35. So to be an adult and have and to have a parent who's still alive, certainly a father who is still alive, it's not that common. But if the father was alive, then she could return to him and start again, find another husband and try again. So these are options for her. Now, if she's older and she has older children, then she can turn to her children. And that's one of the responsibilities of being a child, is to support your parents when they can no longer support themselves. This is your pension plan. This is your retirement plan, is to have children who can provide for you in your old age. So she could turn to her children if she's got adult children. But in some cases, the children aren't there to support her. Maybe the children have died. Any number of reasons. She hasn't got a father to turn to. Her husband's gone. She's got no children. What is she to do in these circumstances? Well, she's going to find herself destitute with no one to turn to apart from her community. And so this is where the church steps in and says, well, in those situations, we need to be willing to support them. In fact, we're obligated to support them. Now, put this in perspective. This was unprecedented. The only other place you find this is in the Jewish community, who still look to the tithing principle of supporting the widows. But there is no other place in the Greek and Roman worlds where you would support a widow. She is destitute. She's as good as dead. She has no other options. The Christians come along and say, no, we're going to meet these needs. We're going to help these widows out to the best that we possibly can. However, if we're going to do that, we need to first of all make sure that there are no other options that this woman has. Now, why be so stingy? Well, because you don't have much to begin with. We're talking about a community of people living at subsistence level poverty. They don't have excess anything to really spare. The very little bit that they have has to be absolutely considered to who it's given to, because otherwise we're just going to waste it on somebody who could otherwise meet their own needs in a different way. So the very little we have to be faithful with. We have to be faithful stewards of these resources and make sure that they're only going to go to the people who are in absolute need, who've got no other choice or no other option of support. So that's why he says somebody over 60, in other words, too old to have children again, too old to remarry, somebody whose children haven't looked after her, which is just an egregious offense, as Paul says to Timothy, and who otherwise just have no other options, but have also proven themselves to be faithful members of the community. People who are not just coming into the community because they can get a free handout, but people who have shown that they're part of the community, they've been faithful to the community, who are then worthy or at least entitled to receive this support from almost as reciprocation from the years of support that they themselves have put into the community. But importantly within that, there is still a responsibility on the part of the church to be responsible for their resources, to be responsible for their financial resources and their people resources. It's very easy for somebody to come along and to abuse the kind-heartedness of a Christian community. And so we have to protect ourselves from that as well. There are people who just simply want to take advantage of a handout. And so again, what this passage in Timothy teaches us is to be wise about the way that we steward these resources. There are people who have genuine needs, but we have to determine that these are genuine needs that we can meet, that we have the resources to meet them, and that there are no other options available for that person. In other words, it's just simply being faithful. It's being wise with the resources entrusted to us by God and by this community for these particular purposes. Now, there's a third type of support that the New Testament teaches us as well. And we find this in 1 Corinthians 16, verse 1 to 4. And what Paul is doing here is he's instructing the Corinthians to take up an offering for the Christians in Jerusalem. Now, one of the things we don't notice in Acts and really throughout Paul's letters is that one of the major tasks that he has is to raise an offering for the Christians in Jerusalem who are going through some financially and some spiritually difficult times. And so what Paul is trying to do is to encourage the Gentile Christians in the communities that he started to support them. And this is what he's doing throughout his various missionary journeys. And so there's this more of an international support for our brothers and sisters that the New Testament also teaches us to be part of. Well, I hope that's been helpful. Don't forget, if you want to go deeper on this topic, you can do that with the podcast. The link for that is in the description below. And if you'd like to support this channel as well, you can find a link for that as well in the description. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you next week for the final part of this series about the New Testament and money. See you then.